So I'm going to start this episode off with a very stupid question. How many of you have social media accounts? Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, even YouTube is a social media platform. So yeah, how many of you have that? All of you, I assume? Then here's a follow-up question. How many of you have stopped using some form of a social media platform? Something that's outdated. Like for example, myself, I've stopped using Friendster. I kind of stopped using Facebook. I still use it, but I no longer check it on a daily basis, maybe weekly. Yeah, how many of you have already stopped using some form of a social media platform whatsoever? Some of you, maybe? Okay, now here's the hard one. How many of you have stopped using social media altogether? Actually, I don't consider YouTube to be I only consider YouTube to be half a social media platform because you don't need an account to start using YouTube, but for the rest, you really need an account. How many of you? None of you, I assume. Last week or so, I was watching this documentary on Netflix, which is titled The Social Dilemma, and it led me to think of some repercussions of social media and more or less the web in general today. It also led me to think what the trade-off really is. So I did a bunch of research, and in this episode, I'm going to share with you the research, the topics that I've found, and why you should just consider or at least entertain the idea of deleting yourself from social media platforms. Let's take a look and see what it really feels like with this article on medium.com written by a Corey Simon. He's 17 years old and he deleted all his social media. Okay, first he opens up by saying that it is a time-wasting addictive drug, which is true, at least for him. And like any powerful tool, social media can be used for good as well as bad. And in his case, it was bad. Continues describing his world on social media. Every 17-year-old is Snapchatting, Instagramming, Facebooking, or whatever else. And if you're not involved, you're considered an outsider, you're looked as weird, stupid. And we all know how this feels. If you ask people around you, how many of you don't have a Facebook account, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't. And just because of that, they're considered weird. And he continues, you struggle to get invited to events and people won't want to be friends with you. You become that one kid who was always chosen last to play games. That's essentially how kids who don't use social media are looked at. So in this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the pros and cons of today's social media, and more importantly, why you should be seriously considering stopping yourself from using it and deleting your profiles altogether, but not actually doing them, okay? I don't think everyone should take the extreme step of removing yourself from social media altogether, but stay tuned after this introduction. Hi everyone, welcome to the Better Podcast, where I aim to help people not be good or be great, but become better. I'm your host Melvin Cito, and this podcast is one about making yourself better, especially in emotional and mental management, relationships, and communication. And on some episodes, I managed to touch a little bit of everything just like this one. If you're new here, consider subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or whichever platform you choose to consume your content on. Finally, if you're not new here, it means you enjoy the content, so make sure you share this episode or previous episodes with someone who will enjoy it as much as you do. So at the same time, leave a review on Apple Podcasts and be sure to follow the socials in the show notes. It really helps this channel get discovered so that I can continue making more great high quality content in the future as well. Now let's talk a little bit about social media. You have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have Instagram, like all those that I mentioned earlier. And all of these platforms all serve their various purposes. They have made our lives easier. They have reconnected people with each other. I created a group to bring my primary school schoolmates together, and we reunited sometime in, I believe it was 2013, 14, thereabouts. And it has since been 20 years since we last met each other. We met up, we had a great time, and of course, it brought a lot of people together. It has created new communities. People can get together, share a common interest, and make sure that they exchange tips. It has democratized information. Everyone can go out there and become a social media influencer. They can become content creators just like me. And at the same time, if we have something to offer to the rest of the world, social media is a great platform for us to share this information on. And of course, as business owners, we can all benefit from social media as well. I believe in the past, for you to run any advertising campaign, upwards of 5 to 6 figures is the norm anywhere you want to promote yourself. Right now, you can reach out to people for as low as a few cents, and you can get them buying into your idea for a low price that you could have never thought about in the past. And of course, if you were one person who lacked entertainment in the past, you can now just whip out your phone and you'll be entertained? Zombies? Well, at least you're entertained. And if you have had the opportunity to watch The Social Dilemma as I have, you have realized that these benefits are the exact reasons why we keep going back to these platforms. And in a way, these platforms have already engineered ways to turn us, human beings, into livestock ready for the taking, for the benefit of organizations, and more selfishly, themselves. And back to the article by Corey Simon, it says over here that he was actually regularly putting up Instagram posts, rigorously working out how many likes per minute he was getting, and deleting photos if it didn't get at least 150 likes, which is a bit ridiculous, isn't it? And in hindsight, the fact that he ever put in so much effort and time into it all makes him so incredibly mad and embarrassed. And if you do the math for yourself, just like he got a phone when he was 13, he's 17 and a half right now, he spent 3 hours every day, that adds up to 4,927 hours worth or spent or wasted on social media. And side learning, he quotes, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now." I think it's relevant to point that out right now because it's true. We have limited time on this earth and we really have to make an effort to make the most out of it. And surely you know for yourself that social media is taking up a huge chunk of that time. So that's reason number one why you should be deleting social media. And a huge reason as well. Now let's continue reading his journey. And some of the things that have happened since he stopped social media, he now feels like how he was when he was a child. He has a feeling of overwhelming creativity and not caring what people think. And some of you using social media would have noticed this as well. Whenever you type a post, you really think through how people would think. And what is that post going to achieve for me? And we all know the impact of how one post gone wrong can make a huge impact in your life. That's why we think so hard. We spend so much time thinking how to craft that perfect post. Let's continue. He now has an abundance of free time on his hands, and we all know the feeling associated with this as well. Because how much time has been spent in your lives mindlessly scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, post after post, and we all know by now that these platforms are carefully designed to make sure that we keep scrolling. One pull down, you refresh the entire page, and you get a brand new stream of posts that seem fresh to you, even if it's the same post. Notice on Instagram how they display the next picture when they When someone uploads more than one picture at a time, they show the next picture on the next refresh. They want you to keep scrolling mindlessly. Same thing goes for YouTube. Same thing goes for Facebook. Everything that's recommended to you is exactly what they think is most relevant to you. And that's why you end up wasting so much time on social media. And let's continue. He stopped feeling inferior to others. And he describes his experience as scrolling, constantly comparing our behind the scenes to others' perfectly curated image of themselves, scrolling through Facebook thinking, I wish I could have that, he's so lucky, and all other ridiculous thoughts. And I think you know the reason why, because most people, they will only upload or share the positive sides of their lives. That's what people want to see. People want to see positive things going on in other people's lives. And how many people actually have the courage to share something negative? Now, let's take a look at the next article to show you exactly what happens then. Right, so on this article titled Why I Deleted All My Social Media Accounts on Human Parts, hosted by Medium.com, written by Felicia Sullivan, she mentions that she was tired of measuring the depth of her connection with the world based on how she was posting carefully curated and edited information about her life. People bemoan the fakeness of social media in pursuit of the real, but they don't actually want real. More positivity in posts means higher follower counts. People want to follow those who don't share much negativity, and that's a fact. And this is the reason why someone like her would feel worse when she shared negative information. She states, the knowledge that people saw her pain and didn't seem to care enough to reach out was worse than the actual cause of her anxiety. She also shares about how she saw a post in a hate forum about a friend. The two of them are acquaintances who share a certain level of intimacy because they have both courted death and can speak plainly about it. They trade bad jokes on suicide and laugh because it's a way of coping, a way of setting down the weight that threatens to swallow them whole. And people who remain anonymous cut into her because of how she handled seeking treatment for her illness. She wasn't supposed to say anything on social media. She wasn't supposed to speak at all. She was just supposed to disappear and deal with it. She writes, not too long ago, I posted a series of stories on my private Instagram. I had just recovered from an anxiety attack, returned from urgent care, and was heavily medicated. I talked about stress in a series of videos, and while hundreds of my quote-unquote friends watched them, only 3 actually reached out. The knowledge that people saw her pain and didn't seem to care enough to reach out was worse than the actual cause of her anxiety. Honestly, I can't empathize with her because I haven't had the same experience. What I can empathize with and what I understand is these days, so many people are feeling the need to get affirmation from social media. Getting likes is more important than being really liked by people around them. Getting thousands of friends is more important than making just tens of real friends. And it's a bit sad to know about this, isn't it? But it's true. I think nowadays people seek affirmation online so much so that they tend to not want to connect with the world. Think about when you go out to a public place for a dinner or lunch or whatever, and you see a family seated at a table next to you. If you're lucky enough to see a youth sitting with their parents, chances are this youth is going to be on his or her phone. And what are they doing to miss out on this valuable family time? Chances are A, playing games, or B, on social media, just scrolling down, commenting, chatting with friends, you name it. It's harsh but true, because they would rather focus on their screen in front of them with the connections that they have made with people. Some are just strangers, some of them are acquaintances, but the real people in front of them who care for them, who love them, who brought them up, they're being ignored. And I use the word youths a bit loosely here because it can happen the same thing happens for couples, it happens to friends in a group as well. And the worst thing that you can see is a bunch of people getting together, seemingly having a great time before that. Then suddenly everyone quietens down and all of them are looking at their phones. And I have evidence to show that it's worse than we think. This article on Time shows that depression and suicide rates are rising sharply. You can tell that between 2009 and 2017, rates of depression among kids from 14 to 17 increased by more than 60%. The increases were nearly as steep among those ages 12 to 13 and 18 to 21. Shockingly, the rates of suicidal thoughts, plans, and attempts all increased significantly, in some cases more than doubled, between 2008 and 2017. And it's by no means a small sample size because they had 600,000 people do this survey. So we all know that correlation doesn't mean causation, but there's a case for it. And it says over here that there was one change that impacted the lives of young people more than older people, and that was the growth of smartphones and digital media like social media, texting, and gaming. And research aside, many parents, teachers, guidance counselors, and others who work with young people say social media and heavy technology use are a problem. One of the study's authors go on, they spend less time with their friends in person and less time sleeping and more time on digital media. But of course, it's not all that bleak. Other experts say that the existing evidence doesn't support singling out social media or technology as a culprit. When it comes to social media and depression, the findings are all over the place. So it's not that bad, but we all know about the negative impacts of social media. At the same time, going back to Corey's story, after stopping the use of social media, he has started appreciating the smaller things. He slowed down and was able to look at things from a different perspective. He has become more appreciative of what people do for him. He now feels that he has quite possibly the best mother in the whole world. How many 17-year-olds would think like that? And yes, one particular side effect, he has become more in touch with the real world. We can only concentrate on one thing at one time. And if you're concentrating, if you're being distracted constantly by social media, it means that you're being isolated from the real world. And remember what I said, that I'm not going to make sure that you remove yourself from all social media platforms, but what can you do about it? More on that right after this break. Let's continue this episode with an article written on 10 by Colin Horgan. The title is straightforward: We Don't Need Social Media. I mean, the subtitle itself is already really pretty abrasive, right? The push to regulate or break up Facebook ignores the fact that its services do more harm than good. And they are really using strong words over here. They call them tech monopolies that facilitate their day-to-day lives, extracting and exploiting their personal data and behaviors as they go. And it's true, we don't need social media for all the things we are told we need it for. We don't need social media to make friends or build relationships. We don't need it to become active or engaged in politics. We don't need it to explore our cities or find new things to do. We don't need it to hail a cab, catch a bus, or fly on a plane. We don't need it to hear new music or read new books. We don't need it to do our shopping. We don't need it to develop or discover subcultures or like-minded groups to appreciate good design. We don't need it to plan our lives, and we don't need it to understand the world. That being said, these platforms have and will continue to develop new ways to make our lives easier. So while you continue to use these platforms, we have a personal responsibility to ensure that we are aware of what we share with these platforms and how they are targeting us to push us with the information that they deem as relevant to us. Without that kind of awareness, we risk seeing more and more of a certain type of information, and in the worst case scenario, we get fed with misinformation, we believe it, and we take it as truth. And this article goes on. We don't need it to help make corporate or government surveillance of our lives easier. We don't need social media to make harassment and stalking easier. We don't need it to spread conspiracy and violence, nor do we need it to poison our democratic discourse or to infect our minds with dangerous anti-scientific nonsense. More importantly, we don't even need social media to show us ads. And in this article written by Michael Simmons, while everyone's distracted by social media, successful people double down on an underrated skill. He summarizes the perils of social media and information in general into four horsemen. I love these analogies. The first one is content shock, and he quotes from Herbert A. Simon, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. Save that punchline for yourself. And the summary of this problem is much new information and many new skills we could learn are out there, but they're so buried that we don't even know they exist. Horseman number 2, echo chambers. As groups grow in size, they become less stable, more diverse, and fracturing into subgroups. And at the end of the day, these echo chambers believe itself as the true reality, and it fights to maintain this belief by demonizing other groups. In an age of social media and targeted personalized content, these echo chambers become even more insular as we're exposed to less and less information outside of our own chosen groups. Horseman number 3, constant distraction. We spoke about this earlier on, and it's summarized as our physical and virtual environments being surrounded by more and more content, whether it's editorial, advertising, or even worse still, fake news. This content is marketed specifically to our own inclinations, which prove a powerful distraction that can keep us from pursuing more useful information or even our own goals. Number 4, FOMO, which is summarized as too many good options combined with not enough foreknowledge on which is best, means we are constantly second guessing our choices and making sure that we want everything. And again, what can we do about it? The only way we can make this potential info apocalypse into utopia is to change our approach to media from a reactive to a proactive one. We cannot passively have faith in the streams on our news feeds, our default settings, and notifications to guide us. These companies that control these do not have our best interests in mind, and they have broken the public trust. And like what I mentioned earlier, these platforms were designed and engineered to keep your attention for as long as possible in the short term and the long term. Their business model is fundamentally conflicted with our own life goals. So what can we do to avoid judgment by these four horsemen? Personally, I think it's important for us to be able to take a social media fast every now and then. Even though you don't have to delete all your social media accounts, what you can do is set a cutoff time and make sure you don't touch social media after that. Of course, there's time to unwind. There's time for you to spend time just looking through your feed and make sure you're up to speed on some information with some communities, but you owe it to yourselves to make sure that this time blocked out is adhered to and to limit the amount of time you spend on it. The second thing that I believe that you should be doing is the second thing. I think it might be the third thing. The first one was actually being aware of what you're sharing with them. The second one is to be able to fast from social media. And the third most important thing we have to learn how to do is to stop seeking affirmation from social media. At its best, social media is great for reconnecting people, for catching up with that old primary school teacher, for making sure that you have a way to contact old friends and to link up whenever possible. And sometimes some people just want to have an avenue to #humble brag. That's what I've been seeing in my newsfeed all the time these days. Or maybe at least share your happiness, share your joys in this world, and hopefully people would appreciate the fact that they see something positive for their day. But again, never seek affirmation from the likes, from the number of people reacting, from the comments. Whenever I post something like that, I don't care. I just post, I forget about it. That's it. That's all you need to do with social media. For people who really matter to you, for the friends who really should matter to you, they will reach out, they will share your joy, they will text you, they will make sure to make more meaningful connections. And those are the people you want to treasure, not the fake acquaintances and the just numbers, just followers on social media, on Instagram or on Facebook. You don't need to care about such people at all. But at the end of the day, if you do decide to delete your social media accounts, I don't think any bad will come out of it. Sure, it might be more difficult for you to get information because you need to consult various news sites. You probably need to start using bookmarks again. And maybe if you wanted to reach out to people, you have to reach out to them one at a time. Or maybe you could have just multiple WhatsApp group chats with people that you care about. And if you have been following this podcast for some time, you might have remembered the story about me catching up with a friend whom I had known for the past 30 years. I caught up with him by sending him a text, not because I saw a post on Facebook, but because I remembered it was his birthday. And that was something that I rely on Facebook so much to do. But his birth date and mine were just so close together that I always remember it every year. And I make it a point to wish him blessed birthday every single year. And if we have time, we will aim to catch up. And that's something that I would do more in the future as well. So if you can, comment below with your birthday. Tell me when's your birthday. If it's close enough, it's easy to remember, I'll definitely do that. And we have come to the end of this episode. Question of the day: what good things or what bad things have come out of social media for you? Let me know in the comments on YouTube, write to me, or anything. Just reach out to me, right? Once again, this has been The Better Podcast. I have been your host, Melvin Cito. And remember, do all the things you need to do on podcasts. Follow, subscribe, whatever. I don't care about talking about that anymore. Comment on YouTube with some of them, or visit my website, melvincito.com/better. That's melvinssetoh.com/better. And finally, this podcast has a new tagline, which I think might be a bit more catchy. Let me know what you think. Don't aim to be good. Don't stop being better. I'll see you.